Are y'all still with us? Wow, y'all are really troopers, stormtroopers, biological medicine stormtroopers. Well, thanks for hanging with us, and because I know it's been a long day, and we're, lots going on in there, and I'm going to jump from the genes all the way into the energy, back into the energy. The truth is that Kim Chi already did a lot of my presentation yesterday. So that makes it very easy for me, so I could just kind of skip through a lot of this, and it'll make it easy on you. But in truth, it's interesting how we didn't plan it this way, but she really talked about a lot of the same things that I'm going to talk about. Life, we think of as structure plus energy plus information. And there's been two kind of opposing forces here. Democritus, who coined the word atom, maintained that everything, including organisms, is reducible to its constituents, whereas Aristotle held that life processes are autonomous and organisms are a part of the whole. Now, this hasn't changed much. We still have these two opposing ideas. In science, you see it mostly in philosophy too. So they remain today, with the biochemical view of life represented by the molecular reductionism and the holistic view of life by what we call integral biophysics and systems biology. That embraces a biofield concept of life, a systems interconnected concept of life. So this integral biophysics, it's a primary shortcoming of molecular biology is that the holistic character of the physical world now recognized in quantum theory is either not acknowledged or rejected as irrelevant. And this is, as you could see, Dr. Pop is in this too. And you remember Kim Chi talking about him yesterday. And unfortunately, he had a stroke. And this is really a sad thing because he was really on the verge of some amazing research. And there's not, I don't really know many people that have picked up that research that he was doing and are continuing it in the way that he was presenting it to the world. So the worldview of integral biophysics is much richer than holistic and more holistic than molecular biology. So we have this molecular biology and this integral biophysics. I'm not going to read all this, but basically the idea is that we're talking about interconnectedness, that integral biophysics talks about interconnectedness of the whole universe of everything, of us with our environment. And so this is the way physics and physicists think of everything nowadays. They don't think that we're separate, we're in any way different than what's out there. We're all a part of this whole system, and we're all interconnected. So living systems are regarded as complex, nonlinear, dynamic, self-organizing systems at a global or holistic level. Living systems are constantly exchanging energy with information at multiple levels of organization within their surroundings in order to maintain themselves, in order to maintain the homeostasis, in order to regulate, in order to adapt. Living systems are open systems exchanging energy, matter, and information with the environment in order to develop and maintain themselves, self-adapt, self-regulate. The human body emits low-level light, what we call biophotons, and this is what Kim Chi was talking about yesterday. Heat, acoustical energy, the sound energy. It has electrical and magnetic properties, and it also may transduce energy that cannot be easily defined by physics and chemistry. So in other words, there's still a lot we don't understand. We know that we emit light, we emit sound, and as well as we're electromagnetic, we emit heat. So these are the things that we can identify now, but there's probably still some things that we don't know. All of these emissions are part of the human energy field, and we simply call it the biological field or the biofield. So we're talking about bioprotons, biophotons, and how they interconnect. And it's like when you were talking last night, Ian, and you were saying how that in Buddhist, how they can communicate through third eye to third eye. They're exchanging information in this way. They're exchanging biophotons. When we come into contact with someone, we're exchanging information through light. So biophotons is a branch of quantum biology dealing with interactions between single photons and biological matter in order to understand the inner workings of cells and tissues in living organisms. So we're talking about biophoton emission. I'm going to let you all kind of look into your little flash drive and read more about this. I'm going to belabor what Kim Chi already talked about, but it's all from Dr. Pop's research, and these are several papers that he wrote, and What is Life, Integral Biophysics, Electromagnetic Bioinformation. Some very interesting articles here, and if you have trouble sleeping, you could read some of these articles. But basically, he used highly sensitive light measuring equipment in order to monitor the light emitted by living cells. He was able to confirm that living cells emit small bursts of light. He determined that cells do not just radiate light, they also absorb light. In fact, the storage time is relative to the quality of the cell. So if the cell can't store light, then it's degenerative in some way, or some dysfunctional property within the cell. Therefore, a healthy cell will store light the longest, while an unhealthy cell will give off the light in a shorter time. Pop also discovered that the dying cell process of a cell is identical to that of a star. Shortly before its death, it will change into a supernova. It'll go bright and just release a lot of light. And so thereby its radiation increases 1,000-fold. He further discovered that a healthy cell radiates coherent light, while a diseased cell radiates chaotic light. And this is what Kim Chi was talking about, coherency. And coherency helps the cell also release hormones and other types of information. If the cell isn't coherent, if it's not communicating with other cells in a normal way, then you start to develop biochemical dysfunctions. So this controls the biochemistry of the cell, the light exchange, the coherency of the cell. So now it's been shown that every cell in the body emits more than 100,000 light impulses or photons per second. It's a lot. These light emissions or biophotons emitted by humans and all living things are the steering mechanisms behind the biochemical reactions. So we're talking about coherence. Biophotons play a very important role for the helping of all systems of the human body to communicate and maintain balance. One of the reasons for this is because they have a strong coherent properties. In other words, they're able to cooperate and are unified as one. They talk to each other in a unified, coherent way. And this is when you're doing like electrodermal screening and many of these things, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to develop a resonance, a coherence, a communication with the body in order to get that information. So there's actually the Institute of Biophysics, and you could look into this, and they're starting to publish more and more papers. Okay, so accumulated body toxins can disrupt the coherence of these biophotons and therefore reduce their ability to effectively transfer information. We know this, that toxins cause problems with cell communication. The toxins get stored outside the cell in the mesenchyme, eventually they impregnate the cell, and then they affect these biophotons of the cell. So when the biophotons aren't coherent, we experience sickness due to communication problems amongst our cells, organs, and energy systems. Biophoton, ultra-weak photon emission reflects a pathophysiological state with respect to the mitochondria, the ATP production, and the susceptibility to oxidative stress, which is derived from the excessive production of reactive oxygen species or a lack of activity for antioxidant protection. It just shows that how free radicals can damage the cell, and of course it's going to affect the communication in the cell and reduce the biophoton coherence. So the discovery of this biophoton emission leads scientific support to acupuncture, particularly the existence of qi, right? The energy flowing through the meridians, which may be related to node lines of the body's biophoton field. This is Dr. Pop's quote. So this is starting to give credibility in some ways to the more ancient Chinese traditions and Ayurvedic traditions, which all are based on energy medicine. So that's what I'd like to talk about next. Is we know that now science is starting to validate traditional energetic medicine, and but we still have this model, this ancient model of like 2,000-year-old model of meridians, of points, and this model has been clinically used and successfully clinically used, and I think that's it. It's a model that we can all use now. So even though we don't completely understand it, science is just beginning to understand it, we could still continue to use it, and it is being validated. So when people say, oh, there's nothing to meridians, that's just a bunch of bogus, it's not true. We're now understanding it more, and there is some hard science behind this. So we have this energy field, this biofield. The biofield concept evokes shades of vitalism, an old philosophical concept that goes back to the 1600s. Vitalism is a belief that life and organic substances differ fundamentally from the inorganic world because they contain a vital force, a metaphysical entity intrinsic to life that renders it alive. It's kind of like Frankenstein. It's alive, so it comes alive with chi, with a vital force. Vitalistic principles in the human biofield concept underlie all traditional medical models. Qi in traditional Chinese medicine, prana in Ayurvedic medicine, and ki in Japanese Kampo medicine. The biofield describes an energy field and information that regulates the homodynamic function of living organisms and plays a substantial role in health processes. Many noteworthy biologists of the 20th century have put forth theories to explain both the biological development and integrity of organisms. In the 1800s, this concept of the biofield information that guided embryogenesis in organisms was introduced by Hans Dresch, and in 1912 further elaborated by Alexander Gerwisch. And then Weiss in 1939 developed a similar concept to explain the development. Gerwisch, in 1923, he was experimenting with onions, and he discovered that the onion roots of neighboring plants, if they were placed in a quartz pot, that they would behave differently than if they were placed in a silicone pot. In other words, they wouldn't grow. And the only difference was that the silicone pot filtered the UV wavelengths of light while the quartz did not. So he theorized that the onion's roots could communicate with each other in some way through ultraviolet light. So he was onto something. He was onto this biophoton theory. And so this is how companion planting, these plants communicate with each other through light, just like we communicate each other through light. And that's at least one way that we know of. They probably have other ways too. They probably have deep conversations. So Nikola Tesla, she talked about him yesterday. Fascinating man, and he was certainly a pioneer in this area. And unfortunately, he died penniless. And, look what he did. He was pretty much the founder of alternating current and so many things out there. Nowadays, they're trying to develop the technology which he had already developed, like the new iPhone. When you set it on top, it's actually on top of its charger. It's charging somewhat at a distance. It's not being actually plugged in. And so this is, new technology. Actually, Tesla had already shown this, that you could charge things from a distance. And his thought was he could build these towers and charge cities, and that we wouldn't need wires. It wouldn't be necessary. Way ahead of his time. As I say, some of these quotes were quotes that actually Kim Chi had yesterday. We are whirling through endless space with an inconceivable speed. All around us is everything spinning, everything is moving, everywhere is energy. There must be some way of availing ourselves of this energy more directly. Another fascinating man and sad, sad story was Wilhelm Reich. And Reich was an amazing engineer and scientist, very detailed scientist. He's probably one of the few scientists that had his books burnt by two governments. He was Jewish and in Germany, and he escaped the Germans. The Germans burnt his books in Berlin in the big bomb fire there. And he comes to the United States looking for freedom. And what do? We burn his books again in the incineraries in New York. And so he was persecuted most of his life, though he came up with many interesting ideas. He believed in a chi, and he called it orgone. And he felt that you could accumulate this chi by putting organic and inorganic materials together and creating a box. And that it would actually accumulate the chi, and he put people that were sick into the box, and he found that they actually did very well. And so, but he was, again, persecuted for this, imprisoned, and he died in prison with a heart attack. Basically, broken heart is the way I see it, from what they did to him. Royal Reich, another sad story, but he was very on to frequencies and how frequencies had different effects on organisms. And of course, that was kind of the foundation. He was one of the American founders of frequency therapy, and which a lot of that ended, but it continued in Europe. And there's some very advanced frequency therapy machines in Germany and Switzerland. But he created a frequency generator. He also died penniless. And George Delaware, who was into radionics, I don't know if you've heard of this guy, fascinating researcher too. Radionics is like, you're creating a healing effect from a distance. It's kind of like if you pray for someone. What are we doing there? We're trying to tap into some type of field of energy and send healing energy to that person. But he was doing this through instrumentation, trying to find different frequencies that would emit healing forces to an individual. At the same time, he created a camera and just some fascinating things. But he, again, also was very ridiculed for his work. And he created these detectors, these radionic detectors, which are very much faster than pendulums or dowsing rods and things like this. And he believed that around all living beings there was nodal points, kind of like acupuncture points within the field of energy. There were certain specific nodal points, and that they would change depending on how a person thinks and what, in other words, their emotional content in their belief system. Fascinating stuff. Yale biologist Harold Saxton Burr also proposed an electrodynamic field underlying life. So, as you can see, there was a lot of information going on at the turn of the century that was pushing this. And unfortunately, many of the developers and researchers in this area of biofield research were ridiculed, criticized, damaged in different ways, financially, or either actually imprisoned. Okay. Well, this is good. And fortunately, in 1994, the term biofield was coined by a panel of manual medicine modalities convened at the National Institutes of Health to discuss complementary and alternative medicine. So the NIH committee defined biofield as a massless field, not necessarily electromagnetic, that surrounds and permeates living bodies and affects the body. So we're now starting to get terminology defined through science and sanctioned by the government. There's different ways of measuring the human biofield. You've heard of high voltage electrophotography, or the gas discharge visualization camera, also known as Kirlian photography. And maybe you're familiar with this and familiar with the cut leaf effect, that they would take a leaf and they would cut a piece of it and they would take the camera and they would photograph the leaf, but the energy of the leaf was still there. In other words, say if they cut this part of the leaf off, that it would still be there. Now, it was reproducible, but it wasn't always reproducible. But it was reproducible more than not, and it still can be. So many people continued this research. And this is, these cameras are actually available now. This is a website in which you could purchase one of those cameras. So this was, again, the phantom leaf research, fascinating. But you could, of course, photograph all kinds of things, apples and humans, human hands, and looking at the energy around it. That in 1961, there was a researcher in Korea, and Dr. Kim. He showed the relationship between acupuncture meridians and what he called a primovascular system. And he injected a specific blue dye into an acupuncture point, and he observed that the dye actually followed a meridian system, a known meridian system. And he concluded that the meridians belonged to what he called the Bonghan system. In other words, he named it after himself. But he was on to something. You know, he was injecting dye into acupuncture points and following it and seeing that indeed, you know, this is a different pathway. This is not a neurological pathway. It's not a lymphatic pathway. It's not a circulatory pathway. It's a different kind of pathway, an energetic pathway. So there's been studies that have confirmed his research. And you could read a little bit more about that. What I'd like to do is jump ahead and talk about the chi flow. And I know that there's acupuncturists out there, and this may be a little boring to you, I'm sorry. But for those of you that are not real familiar with it, I wanted to kind of explain some of that. And then I want to give you some information that you may not know. So here in Chinese medicine, we believe that qi flows. And people say, well, what are you trying to do when I'm giving them acupuncture? I say, well, I'm trying to get your qi to flow, because if it becomes stagnant, then you develop pain and problems, inflammation, whatever are signs of stagnant qi. And I know that's a real simple concept, but that's exactly what you're doing, and you're trying to get it to flow. And so the way that it flows in traditional Chinese medicine is you could start with the lung meridian, the lung to the large intestine to the stomach meridian to the spleen, spleen to the heart to the small intestine to the urinary bladder to kidney to pericardium, pericardium up to the triple wormer down to the chest, triple wormer, and then you have the gallbladder meridian from the head to the toe, and then the liver meridian back up. So do you see what I just did? It's going this way. It's going up, out, down, up. So generally meridians go up and down, up and down. And so here we have the lung meridian, and there's specific points along the lung meridian that are very important. Large intestine meridian, again, I'm going in the same order. So lung flows into the hand flows up to the head flows down all the way to the foot, the stomach meridian. But what's important here is that these meridians flow through organs, glands, and tissues. And that's the interconnectedness of it. And so we could see, for example, in the stomach meridian, that we have the eyes, the maxillary sinus. We have teeth that are involved within this meridian system. We have the thyroid and the thymus gland involved. We have the breast involved. Of course, the gastrointestinal system, as well as in males, in females, the reproductive system too, all the way down into the foot. Spleen, heart, small intestine. So each of these meridian systems have specific pathways, and where the pathways come close to the surface of the body, we have points, and we could manipulate the energy of the body through that point. the manipulation can be either through pressure or through a needle technique or through some other kind of modality like heat, light, like laser nowadays. I mentioned electricity, but you could also combine like needles with electricity and do electric needling and other ways. You can inject the point with different kinds of biological medicines or even vitamins. When I lived in China, studying in China, we did a lot of point injection with simply B12, and that seemed to work quite well, or even just water. So these are all the meridian systems. We also have, well, I mean, every animal has its own meridian. So we could see pictures of horses and their meridian systems, cows, pigs, these are dogs and cats. And so I mean, in China, I even saw meridians of chickens and ducks. I was kind of like, wow, you know, look at this stuff. But it's all been mapped out, you know, long ago. And you know, I don't know who thinks this stuff up, but somehow they knew it. Okay, they just knew it. And so the biofield and meridians have a potential to be corrupted and the energy blocked. When the energy flow is blocked or disrupted, then of course a natural healthy balance cannot be maintained and disease states will become evident. And so what kind of things can block the energy of the body, the bioenergy? Well, one of the most common things, which you brought up, Ion, yesterday, was scars. And this could be easily tested for. Ion showed us ways to test for scars. But you could just simply ask, do you have any scars anywhere? And so one way to work with this is you look where the scar is and you look at what meridian it's involved in. Where is the scar? Like it could be on the stomach meridian, kind of cutting across like a hysterectomy scar or a gallbladder scar or something like this. And these scars often can be injected, or you could just lace needles around them, do acupuncture on. Or you could use laser. There's ways to empower the energy to flow better through the scar and to try to release the blocked energy around the scar. But often they're injected. There's also internal scars that we don't know about, since surgical adhesions. We've heard a lot of talk this weekend about dental foci in cavitations. These also create an interference field within the body. Concussions. Medical implants, metal inside the body. Diseased organs, well, if a gallbladder is sick or diseased, it could cause an energetic flow to be blocked. Appendix, tonsils, colon, all of these are areas that are common that can become diseased. The tissues can become necrotic, and that would cause a block within the energy. Tattoos and permanent piercings, that can also be an issue. Well, there's also in Chinese medicine what we think of as holographic biofields. And holographic biofields, well, this is one of them that we're most familiar with, is the teeth, the dental holograph, that different meridians affect different teeth, or different teeth affect different meridians, however you want to look at it. So if a meridian's blocked, it might affect that particular tooth. Or if the tooth has been damaged, like from a trauma, it might affect that particular meridian. So it works both ways. It's a two-way street here. There's the ear holograph. This is very ancient. Maybe some of you know that sailors and pirates would put a ring in their ear. Well, this is right through the inner ear point on the ear, and it would help with their sea legs so that they wouldn't get imbalanced on the ship. This was one of the main reasons. They realized this, that if they put a ring in their ear, that they wouldn't have sea legs and they wouldn't get vertigo and get seasick. There's the hands and the feet. And I want to go into this a little bit more and show you something real quick here. That the way this is thought of is that this is a human, that the middle fingers are like a human walking. These are the legs, okay? And the outer fingers are the arms. And the thumb is the head. The base of the thumb is the neck. And this is the body. So this is the front of the body, so that would be the human walking this way. And this is important information to know and to know for your patients, because this is such a simple thing that you could give them. So if they have a knee problem, well, you say, is it right or is it left? Well, again, this is the right leg, right? The middle finger of the right hand is the right leg. And just this knuckle here, the first knuckle, is the hip. Then you have the knee, and you have the ankle. So the knee, the middle knuckle of your middle finger, corresponds to the knee here. This is the knee point. So you could have them rub that area. So I just want you to rub it, periodically. Just get in there and rub it and fish around and see if you can't find some sort of sore spot within that area. And so sometimes I'll rub it for them and kind of help fish around and find it. And they'll say, wow, that really is sore. Oh my God, yeah, that's crazy sore. And so they say, well, that's the point you want. You really want to try to find the point that's the most sensitive and just rub it out, rub it out. Don't overdo it. Just whenever you're thinking, like you could do this while you're standing in line at the grocery store or whatever, just rubbing on that particular sore one. So you have the same thing with the outer fingers. You have your shoulder, your elbow, and your wrist. And then for low back problems, it's this is the back. The back relates to the back of the hand. And so between your legs, here, right up here, this is low back. But you can find books on sujak, which it's hand-foot acupuncture. Soja is how we say it in Chinese. Sujak is Korean. And so this is a part of Korean acupuncture. And I think it's a very powerful technique to learn. You don't have to put pins in the body. You could use just pressure to manipulate the energy of the body just from the hands and the feet. This just shows other areas. I was showing on the feet. It's the same thing. It's between the toes. It relates to the back. And then this is the neck. So for headaches, you would use the thumb. And the fleshy part of the thumb relates to the face. Whereas the back of the thumb relates to the back of the head. And then you have the left side of the thumb is the left temple, the right side, the right temple. So you can say, well, where is your headache? We'll say, it's right here in my left temple. I say, well, I want you to rub in this area. And it's remarkably effective. There's also the idea that the finger is a holograph, okay? And so the top of the finger relates to the head, the middle of the finger relates to the chest, and the lower part of the finger relates to the abdomen. And it's fascinating how you could push around with like a little stick. I like to use a Q-tip stick, one of those long Q-tip sticks, at the end of it, and I'll push around to try to find the sorest spot. And once you find it, it's really exquisitely sore. And you could tell, I could put a little seed on it, is what I do. I'll put a seed. You could get these seeds, and I'll show you where you can get them from. and place it on there, and then the patient could go home and push on this. But this is another way around it with the fingers. You also have the dental relate to the area around the cuticle. And so if a person has an abscessed tooth, you could use this system to find where it is and to work around the cuticle of the either hand or the foot to help with that abscess. In Chinese medicine, of course, we look at the tongue. And there's several really good books at the book store on tongue diagnosis. I highly recommend that you consider learning more about this. It's a powerful technique. Usually, of course, I always ask my patients to look at their tongue, and they're the first thing they do is they put their hand over their mouth. Oh, no, he's going to look at my tongue, and because they're shy about that. But eventually, they might close their mouth and kind of stick it out like that. And I say, no, I want you to open your mouth, and so I could really get a good look at it, and then get a flashlight in there and look around, look underneath it, look at all the features of it. The more you observe this, the better you'll get at it, and get the books, start looking at it, comparing tongues to other pictures, make mental notes of it. But you'll see tongue changes in your patients as they heal. great way, but you can see it's holographic, where around the edges of the tongue is the liver. And this is what I was looking for today, is did he have any liver signs on his tongue? Because that's what Kim Chi had said, that he had, some liver stresses. And he did indeed have some little teeny tiny red spots around on the sides of his tongue, which means liver heat. And but moreover, it was more spleen signs. But the tip of the tongue is the heart and the lungs. The back of the tongue is the kidneys. This is where he had the bumps on his tongue in the back, which showed toxicity in the kidneys. There's also the ancient art of facial diagnosis, where certain areas of the face relate to certain organs of the body. Fascinating stuff. Different systems about it, but I encourage you to look into that too. There's the holographic area of the abdomen, and a lot of the what they call hara diagnosis, where they push around and try to find sore areas. There's also naval acupuncture, where they umbilicus, where because the umbilicus is a holograph too, like the ear or the hands, and it's a very powerful way of doing acupuncture. We know today that man essentially is a being of light, and that we communicate in this way, and we communicate with each other in this way, through light, through energy, through sound. And I think this is we're on the frontier of it, but we can use some of these traditional medicines in the models that they've already created, working models, in order to help us in our practice. So I encourage you to look more into it. And there's some energy resources. These are some resources that you could look at. The energy medicine, it's this book, Energy Medicine, and it's a very good one. And there's also Virtual Medicine, which is this book. Yep. And blue book. Excellent text, really well written. And then you probably also need a good book on acupuncture and meridians. And there's several out there. This is one on, it just is Chinese acupuncture and moxibustion. But these are like Bibles that you could use for the energetic anatomy and physiology. Carolyn Meese also has some excellent material on the anatomy of the spirit. I think it's one of the best written books ever on this area, particularly chakras and that part of the energy, and the holographic universe also. Well, that's all I have for you. Any questions about energy or biofield or anything? Good, I know you all are done, I'm sure. Well, thank you.